Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. I hope you all had a great week. I hope you did something fun, and I hope you're ready for more photography reviews. Now, to start with, what do we do here? We review your images. We always look at three aspects of the image. We look at the technical part, where we look at the camera. Let me just double check, hope everything is working and we can continue. So I'm not 100% sure where we lost the connection. However, just quickly, what we do is we look at the technical part of the image where we look at the camera settings, sharpness, and exposure. After that, we look at the artistic part of the image where we talk about the composition, the storytelling, and the main subject. And finally, at the end, if there is a space for it, and I think it's going to be beneficial, then I like to give you some tips and tricks on how to edit your images and how to get the most out of them. So, knowing that, let's just quickly talk about how you can join us for the next episode of Photography Review Show. To send your images, what you need to do, you need to join our membership, which is called Clever Photographer Plus. All you need to do for that is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership, and you can join us. And for a little fee, not only that you will get access to our photography review show, but you will also get a monthly theme bundle of digital tools for photographers. But for example, this month it's a forest and woodlands. Last month was wedding and so on. So you always get over 300 digital tools every month, always themed for certain type of photography. You will get access to our photography review show and access to our Facebook group, Clever Photographer Academy. So this is all out of the way. You know what we're going to be doing, how you can join us, so we can jump straight into it. We have some beautiful pictures to look at. So we're going to start with David and his images here. David, thank you very much for sending your images over. I have two pictures here we're going to be looking at. So let's start right away. Let's just zoom in and look at the camera details. So this was actually captured with the Apple iPhone. Let me just zoom in so you can see more of my screen. Just for those who never been here, be using Luminar Neo for this. Here where you can see the camera details, that's where we always start. So camera settings for mobile phones are a little bit different than when we look at DSLRs. So I'm not going to quickly go through it, just kind of looking at the image. The sky is nice. There is a lots of lovely texture in it. The light is nice and diffused. However, I have to say there is very bit of noise on the image, specifically on the sky itself. And then it kind of goes through the whole part in the dark areas and so on. So noise is one thing. However, the light is quite nice. And the details with this kind of noise sometimes unfortunately go away a little bit. I mean, you can see some of the sheeps, but it's just a little bit noisy. So when it comes to technical part, that would be my first thing. And now moving on to the artistic part and talking about the composition and overall message of this image. Now looking at it, I think that you kind of have to stop and think, what is it exactly you're trying to show us? What is it? Are you trying to show the beautiful sky or the valley with the river and the some of the landscape, or what is it that you're trying to tell? Because looking at it now, there's a lots of sky, which is nice, but it's just a lots of it, and then there is very little amount of the ground. So first thing I would do here, probably I would try to crop it a little bit differently. Now, if you want to show the sky, I think it's always safe to go for the rule of thirds. And let's say that we're going to go in the crop here and actually crop it much tighter, to the point when we get 1/3 of a land and 2/3 of a sky. That's usually a good balance and give us kind of good proportion to make sure that we get a little bit more powerful result. That would be one thing there. And then I think there's just lots happening across the image. So what I would be doing is I would try to use some local adjustments to maybe drive the attention towards certain part of the image. So if, for example, is the center of the image you want to really focus on, maybe just use a simple vignette, just close it a little bit more, somewhere around here. Or you could use tools like dodge and burn, or really simple, just kind of minus exposure with masking and linear gradient, just kind of close the image from the bottom and from the top to add more attention to the center. So let's say something like this. So this is what I would do with the image. First thing, I would crop it to make a little bit more impact with the overall image. And then I would use local adjustments to create more attention and more interesting result. Moving on to image number 2, David, which is this tower is something I've seen a lot in Scotland on the distilleries. So that's maybe what it is. Maybe it's a distillery tower. It's quite nice. There's lots of texture in it. And looking at it, it looks like, especially when you look from far, it looks like you maybe replace the sky, and it's mostly visible, and it's more visible when you zoom out because of the white glow around the tower. Then after, when you kind of zoom in, you can see that some of the parts are kind of leaking in, specifically on the top of the roof here, and also some other parts. If you haven't replaced the sky, then maybe you have edited too much and got this really strong glow around. So although it is an interesting capture, and I quite like the idea here with the tower and the texture, I think the sky is just a little bit crazy for the rest of the image. So technically, yeah, not much to say really when you zoom in. The details are quite nice. You can see some of the heavy chromatic aberration in this part. You can also see the leak of the sky into the picture, so that's not great. Also, different light coming from here. I mean, when you would have this red epic sky, I think you would get more colors in the building as well. So something to maybe look at in the future. As the storytelling, it's, and once again, it's interesting. It's something that could be part of series. So let's say if I would be going to photograph distillery, I would end up with 10, 15 images. This would be one of them, just to put it next to each other. However, just by itself, it's without any explanation. You're looking at it, you're thinking, if you've never been in Scotland or if you've never seen a distillery, you will wonder what is it you looking at. So that's just something to think of for the future. David, thank you very much for sending your images over. It's my pleasure to look at them for you. And if you have more of them, make sure you send them next week so I can look again. Which brings us to another David this time. David, we have 4 images from you, David Peterson. So let's see which one we're gonna look at. So this one is interesting. However, I kind of wonder if you are uh, showcasing the river or the path. There is both of them kind of divided. It's interesting. It's a nice leading line, but then the leading line isn't really leading us anywhere. So we skip that one. This one is beautiful. I love the long exposure. I think it's really well done. That's a great, great shot. So we look at this image and we have 2 more. So let's see what we have here. This is lovely as well. I understand the idea of the foreground here, but actually it's a little bit messy, and I think it takes a little bit away from the overall image. So what I would do, I would probably crop it even further, maybe try something like 16 on 9 here, and really crop it even further. So we could get something really tight and end up with something like this, which would be one idea. Once we would kind of straighten the lines and everything, let's see if we straighten the image and end up with something like this. That could be really interesting. Suddenly we get the confusion or distraction of the foreground away. You could clean it up with a little bit of erase tool or cloning, and that way you get the really nice reflection, which is really strong composition technique itself. You don't really need the foreground here, and anyway the reflection itself around the water really works very well as a reflection, so that would be as a foreground. So that would be one way to do it. Or if you would want to keep some parts of the image in, I would probably just limit it a little bit more. Let's have a look if we can make this a little bigger and maybe end up with something like this. A little bit wider with less of the foreground and much more focusing on the main story, which is here. While we're here, let's talk about quickly about the image itself. This was captured with Nikon D850. The lens is 17 to 35 millimeters. And from the camera settings, we are looking at ISO 64, 24 millimeters, and f11. So as a camera settings, ISO 64, nice and low, 24 millimeters, giving us lovely natural result, and f11, again, making sure that we have a texture and details all the way. Now it says half a second exposure. So I would assume that this is maybe blend, because with half a second, how you manage to capture the dark so sharp, that would really interest me. The water is very nice. I like the reflection. I like the smooth water. So all in all, technically very well done. The sharpness is really good. Lovely level amount of detail. Shame there is no more texture in the sky, but sometimes that's how it is. But in all, really lovely. As a composition, we have done some of the cropping already. So well done there. You saw what I kind of been doing, maybe cropping away a little bit the foreground or cropping it completely, and really just trying to pick up from the image the main parts, the parts that you really want to focus on and see. So that's just something that you can do if you want to. Otherwise, it's a great image. So one more picture to look at. Let's have a look at this. That's also very interesting. Lots happening here as well, but I actually wanted to look at this image because I think it's really lovely. So let's talk about this one. Nikon D810, 16 to 35 millimeters, ISO 100, 16 millimeters, f11, 1/10 of a second. So ISO 100, great, making sure that we have as little noise as possible, that we don't add any additional noise ourselves. 16 millimeter, super wide, but doesn't matter. It looks quite natural and well, so that's really good. f11, again, making sure that even the background is really sharp, works really well here. And 1/10 of a second. Again, I'm not 100% sure if this is 1/10 of the second. Maybe it's a blend. However, the long exposure is excellent. Really cool. Really like the image. All in all, it works really well. I think as a contrast of the really smooth water with lots of green, great capture, and I love it. All I would look at is a little bit of white balance, just to keep an eye on. What you can do with the long exposure is always use the little like a color pick tool, and you can just click on the water itself. That usually adjusts it quite well. In this case, it makes it a little bit too yellow for me, so I would probably go somewhere around here, and let's have a look before, if we get a chance, and after. And it's very subtle, and I don't know if you can see it on a video. However, by increasing the tint a little bit and bringing the exposure down a little bit, we get just a little bit more white, and we also remove a little bit of the green. It's not that visible, it's not a big deal, but that's something that I would do. Equally, if we would want to, we could crop it even tighter, but I actually think it's quite good. If anything, maybe just a little bit from the bottom and get something like this. And then, because our main story is the water itself, I would use develop tool with little minus exposure, and again just close the bottom of the image to add more focus on the actual water. So somewhere around here, if we want, we can close it even further, and that way we get more focus here. You could do the same from the top, and of course that you could also add a little bit of extra vignette just to close the image more. In general, I think it's great. I really like the photo. I think the result is really nice. It's well handled, long exposure, and well done. Equally, this one is also very interesting. There's a lovely reflection here. All I would work on would be the cropping and the framing, just to kind of take away the parts which are not interesting and focus more on the storytelling there. So, David, thank you very much. Well done. Great capture. And sorry. And it's time to move on the next photographer. Next one will be Elizabeth. Elizabeth, thank you so much for sending more photos over for us, and let's go ahead and look at them. So we have two images, both of them captured with Canon RP and the lens Tamron 28 to 300. Starting with this image right here. So again, lovely reflection, just like with David, with the camera settings ISO 100, 64 millimeters, f11, and 1/80th of a second. So ISO 100, great choice. 46 millimeters, still quite wide, but nice still nice framing, nice zoom in, works really well, and making sure that everything stays nice and natural. F11 giving us again sharpness pretty much all the way. Let's have a look, and that's that. And 1/80th of a second, making sure that we have still details even in the highlights, and that all works well. Now, when I zoom in, you can see now this may be also caused by the JPEG size. However, when I look at it, it's just tiny bit soft, tiny bit blurry. So that's something to keep an eye on. When you look at it, maybe some parts, maybe more around this area, it's sharp. But when I look on the top, it has just a touch of softness. So that's something to look at. And Elizabeth, also keep an eye on the sensor dust. You can see it specifically on this part. Just something to make sure that you remove before sharing the image or so on. Additionally, probably because of the editing, you can see a tiny bit of white glow around the rocks, and that can also be quite distracting. This often happens when we really push the image, when we do the strong edit, when you push the contrast around or use some of the AI tools, you can end up with quite strong glow. So when it comes to composition, it's actually quite nice view. One thing I'm missing here a little bit is something that would help us with the scale, just to understand how big the rocks are. However, still, it's a lovely image. I love the reflection. Maybe crop it a little bit tighter to the top. However, the rest is really nice. So let's bring it into edit module. Let's use the crop tool, and we're gonna switch it to free tool. And now let's see if we would just remove a bit of it down here and kind of place the middle of the reflection in the middle of the image, which works well because it creates really nice, strong symmetry. And then you end up with something like this, which I think is a little bit more powerful. After that, we should take care of the sensor dust. To do that, you can use any kind of erase tool. However, here in Luminar Neo, we can use the remove dust spot tool. We just click on it, scans the image, and it should remove the dust spots for us. It did some, but not all of them. So let's just zoom in and select few of them. That's not the one. Here, here, here. You can just select them all, really. It's a quick work. Once we select them, just like this, all we need to do is to click on erase, and just like that, they're gone. So we have cropped it a little bit differently. We have removed the dust spots. And now what about the glow? Now there are multiple different ways you could work on this. But one way, for example, is to go to HSL panel in a color tool or HSL panel anywhere, then jump into luminance and actually make the blue a little bit brighter. So by doing that, you will kind of match the white glow. So you will remove some of that. Equally, you could go into the saturation and just bring the saturation down a little bit. But sometimes it's also a combination of both. So maybe just a little bit of less blue, and in luminance, a little bit of brighter blue. So that way we get reduce of some of the unnatural glow. So that would be something that you could dare. Of course, that you could also try to replace the sky. However, as you have lots of sky in reflection, I don't know 100% how that would work. And other than that, that's fine. The only thing that you have to remember is that when you look at the image, human eyes get usually attracted by contrast. And the contrast in this case is the bright areas. So by looking at the image, the first place you look at is here, sky, around the edges. And really the main part, which is the reflection, gets kind of kept away. So one thing to limit it is maybe use a little bit of vignette. And what we could also do is we could use little extra brightness and just use radial gradient and place it in the center somewhere around here. Just a little bit more focus there. There you go. And you end up with something like this. Elizabeth, that was first image. I got a little bit sidetracked on it. So let's move to the next one. And here, looking at it, it's a lovely sunset. However, I have to say it's really, really noisy. It has some strong blue cast, and sharpness probably is around this area. But because it's so noisy, you almost lose the details altogether. And I think that's the 6400. Now, looking at your image, Elizabeth, we kind of talk about it almost every week or whenever we can. I think one thing you really need to invest in or start to learn on is using a tripod. Even a small one, which is really light, maybe you can have it in a hand or on your backpack or whatever. I think that will really help you, because for capture like this, which is actually nicely done, it's a lovely framing, it's a powerful image, you would need to set up your camera on a tripod, bring the ISO down to 100, then set up your f-stop, which could be 7.1, 11, whatever you would want to, and then let the camera decide the shutter speed, maybe starting with the aperture mode. You just set it to that. It would be maybe a second or maybe even faster, maybe 1/50th of a second or something like that. However, you would keep the details and you would remove the noise. So I think really the tripod for the next step in your photography is what you should do. So just quickly, the reason why so much noise is the ISO 6400. Obviously, we have already talked about the camera. It is Canon RP, Tamron 200 to 300, Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters lens, 116 millimeter zoom in, so it's quite tight crop as well. F8, which is not wrong in this moment, and 1/320th of a second, which is really fast for this time of the day. Hence, why all of this noise. Not much we can do here, really. Obviously, we could try to apply something like the noiseless AI or a little bit of denoise to see if that would help. However, by doing that, we also remove details. And since the details are not there already, it would be difficult to bring them back. So sometimes these things happens and we just can't get the image into what we would like to. I've been in Arundel Cathedral, which is here on the south of England, a few weeks back, and I was working there and I was busy talking to different people. And before I notice, I realized that I've been shooting for last half an hour with automatic ISO inside, and also end up with super high ISO because the cathedral is quite dark and it was overcast day. And I had maybe like 100 pictures I couldn't use, I couldn't fix, I couldn't do nothing with them. So it happens. That's why it's really important to compose yourself on the beginning when you start shooting. Make sure that you go through the checklist and that you check your ISO, that you check your f-stop, and shutter speed. So those three are set right. Then you always, at least after the first shot, make sure that you are sharp with your image, and that way you end up with the best result possible. Elizabeth, thank you so much for sending both pictures over. The first one was great. Second one needs a little bit of helping, but still, it was great to see it. And to finish it off, we're gonna jump onto images with Zdeněk. Zdeněk, let's go for it. Let's have a look at first one and second one. So first one is a landscape capture, this time captured with Canon M50 and lens 24 to 105 millimeters. Now, from the camera settings, ISO 100, 50 millimeters, f16, 1/250th of a second. Now, Zdeněk, this is actually quite good. I'm quite happy. Well, you know, one thing that is missing, it's missing a foreground element, but you know how it is, never happy. From the camera settings, ISO 100, spot on, 50 millimeters is a good wide lens, making sure that we get quite natural result, things don't get distorted and usually work quite well. F16 giving us details all the way, although I think for this situation you wouldn't probably have to go for F16. I think F7.1, maximum F11 would be probably more than enough. Still, it works. 1/125th of a second, making sure that the exposure is good all the way through. So from the image itself, the sharpness is quite nice. The light actually is quite nicely diffused. There are no heavy shadows here. The colors are quite nice too. The sky with the texture in it works quite well as well. And while we're looking at the image, I can see that Zdeněk saying that that's a 5 pictures put together. I'm wondering if it's a 5 pictures of 50 millimeters put together. Well, that ended up quite well, actually. Very, very good. So when you imagine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's a great result. One thing, okay, so technically it's really well done. I have no comment there. Now, when we talk about the composition, the storytelling, you always have to look at few of the kind of basic tools we can use. One, which I think works really well here, is the rule of third. So we have about third of a sky, 2/3 of the land, giving us really nice view. I think that works really well. However, since I never seen this place in my life, it would have been great if there would be something that would give me an idea of the size of the rock or mountain, because I'm assuming this is actually quite big, but I have nothing to judge it by because there is no tree, there is no um, from top of my head, you couldn't imagine human or tree or car or road or rock or anything that would give me little idea of how big thing is. So that would be one thing we kind of missing. To help us with the depth, there could be a foreground, something, rocks, road, bush, anything that you could have incorporated in that would also help. So those are just some things that would help to take it even further, because it's a really epic panorama landscape with the beautiful rocks, but it's just missing the final touch, which sometimes takes a little bit of finding, looking, searching, but usually it's worth it at the end. But great efforts, Denik, for panorama like this. Put it together. It looks very natural. It's nicely put together. Everything works here. Just for the composition, few things that you could maybe try differently for the next time. However, great image. And to be honest, for post-processing, there is not much I would done differently here. I mean, turning it to black and white, we done several times before, so we don't have to repeat that. And everything else works. I mean, you could use a little bit of local adjustments just to add more attention towards, for example, the rocks themselves, because I'm assuming they are the main subjects. And just like how many times we done before, with the simple linear gradient, it actually really makes difference. You don't maybe see it immediately, but if you show it to somebody else, you will see what difference it makes. So maybe just somewhere around -60, bring in more attention there, and then closing it and opening it again and using some extra exposure and brush, and actually just brushing over the rocks, bringing more attention to something like this here, with maybe, yeah, maybe a little less exposure, maybe a little more contrast, something like this. And then maybe also close the sky from the top, similarly to the first one, just minus exposure and linear gradient, and just drag it down here and end up with something like this. Down, actually, somewhere around here. There you have it. So something like this, Zdeněk. I think this image, to make it work even further, is more about the composition and the few tips I was saying, rather than editing. So all in all, great effort for the panorama. And next time, just maybe look for some of these things. Which brings us to the second picture, which is this lovely capture, Hartebeest, if I am right, from the text here. So let's talk about it. Let's see what we have here. Canon 600D with 55 to 250 millimeters lens. Now from the camera settings, ISO 160, 179 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/250th of a second. So as a camera settings, I think it's spot on. 160 on ISO, great effort there, making sure that we don't add any additional digital noise. 179 millimeters, so it's nice zoomed in effect, and really nice punch in to make sure that we have really nice view of the animal. f5.6, let's see how much of the depth it gives us. Still, it works, and 1/250th second, making sure that we are nice and sharp. Now, most of the animal is sharp, the head especially, then we get little softer details around. However, the animal with the horns and everything is sharp. What I really like on this image is the top. Actually, it creates a really nice frame around it. I think the light is tiny bit bright. Let's try to bring it into edit module and just bring it the exposure down just a little bit, just somewhere around here. And for that, we could even use curves and maybe just bring the highlights down a little bit. Let's have a look, maybe even shadows. So to do something like this, what I like is that the animal has a kind of different colors than the rest of the image. So you can notice it immediately. What I think would also work really well here is extra vignette, but placed on the actual animal. So you would kind of close it around with about minus 40, I think. Yeah, I'm sorry. So minus 40, I think works really well here. And what I think it needs, it's a little bit of contrast. So for contrast, I like to use the super contrast at the bottom in a professional tool, just by kind of increasing the midtones contrast. Let's have a look at the highlights. That maybe works really well too. And just leave it there. Let's have a look. Before and after, I think we're getting a little bit stronger result here. Then definitely a little bit of extra exposure, and bring some of the details of the animal out. So let's say just somewhere around here and here again. Yep, that is a little bit better. Kind of rough edit, but still give you an idea of what I would do. And definitely, again, darken it from the bottom if we can a little bit. Again, adding more attention towards the animal itself. So is it too dark? Maybe just a little bit, maybe just somewhere around here. So this is where I would leave it, I think. Zdeněk, lovely capture. Again, I love the trees and plants on the top. I really like the composition with the animal, with the face ending up in the middle. I think works really nicely. There is a space in front of it, gives us that kind of natural space for the animal to breathe. So I think that's nicely done too. And again, the contrast of the animal with the background works really well here. So altogether, I think it's nicely done. So let's just see if we would do a little bit of the enhance, and that actually doesn't work. I think we leave it where it is. So both of them great pictures, great effort on the panorama, which again would works also very well in black and white, and great effort on the animal itself, where we done a little bit of contrast to separate it even more from the rest of the image. We have done a little bit of local adjustments, kind of navigating the eyes on the animal itself. So, Zdeněk, thank you very much for sharing your images with us. I hope you send us more for the next week when I will be back again. Let's quickly check the calendar. 8th. So I'm assuming we're going to see each other on 15th. In the meantime, today there is a national holiday here in UK. Here for coronation, for the king's coronation. Back home in Czech Republic, I believe we celebrating or not celebrating the end of Second World War. And when it comes to capturing, I don't know how about in your place, but around Europe right now, what we're capturing here in the forests, we're looking at bluebells. So I'm doing some bluebell photography. The spring photos also starting to really work now in Europe. You can get some beautiful tulips in Holland if you from around there. You can start to get this really lovely golden glow now, which is great. So if you're into landscape photography, now would be great time to go out and capture those. Forests are great also places now because you get still the wet morning. So if you go early, you will see some nice mist and fog. That's also great to photograph. And of course, other areas like cities also look great because now you can get really like a rainy weather and then lovely sunset with beautiful colors, wet cobblestones, and so on. So when we talking about photography in May, I think it's really exciting because the weathers are changing and you can get some incredible light. Sometimes in the summer, when it's just sunny all the way through during the day, the light doesn't end up to be great. And early in the spring, the chance is much lower that you get a nice light. So now, if you into landscape photography, cityscape, or outside portrait, I think now is a great time to head out. If you have any tips on what you're photographing back home, make sure you put it in the comments on any of the platforms where this video is going on. We are live pretty much every week from 6 p.m. UK time, and we are live on YouTube, our Facebook group, and our Facebook page of Clever Photographers. Folks, I hope you're going to have a great week. I hope you're going to take your camera out. You take care, stay safe, and I will see you all again next week at 6 p.m.